Right, good morning, everybody. It is the 5th of February, 10 o'clock, and this is the Pension Board meeting. This meeting is taking place virtually with all of the members of the board, except for Councillor Kutkalkin, who has given her apologies. Along with the representing officers, we are all online. Can I please ask all members and officers to have their microphones on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? And when you are speaking, please turn on your video. Now, without further ado, and I apologise for the very long agenda we have got, but it is due to circumstances, and I refer back to it with the next report. But please refer to the first item, the minutes held on the 16th of October, which are on pages 3 to 6. Can I take them as read and confirmed and signed?
Mrs. Page, do you want to put your camera on?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. There I am. Okay, so item 1, minutes of the meeting of the 16th, because see, I've got to have 3 computers on the go. Pages 3 to 6, I propose that the minutes of the previous meetings are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Richard. Right, item 2 on the agenda is question times, and I have received a no question. Item 3 on the agenda is to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent, and again, there are none. Are there, under item 4, any members' declaration of interest? There are. Richard?
Thank you. This is one of those, for the avoidance of doubt, comments. There's reference to teachers' pensions on page 30, paragraph 54. I have a pension which I get from the Teachers' Pensions Agency, and my understanding is on the agenda today, the item refers to centrally employed teachers, not me. So for the avoidance of doubt, my understanding is I don't need to declare an interest formally. If I'm wrong, would an officer please correct me?
Thank you, Richard. I do assume that all of the interests we declare as part of our interest declarations are already on record. Is that not so, Angie? So they are as automatically taken as interests?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
But I actually haven't got my teachers' pensions on my interests form. It never seemed to be relevant to me before. It only ever occurs on this particular agenda. But I mentioned it.
You have recorded it before, Mr. Shepherd. That's fine.
Okay.
It has been mentioned before in minutes.
One more thing, if I may. I think you mentioned, Mrs. Page, myself as seconding the minutes. It wasn't me. I think it was Manjit seconded them, actually.
Okay. All right. Never mind, but they are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that out of the way, it is item 5, our first report on the agenda, and that is the local pension board terms of reference at page 7 to 20. And it's Simone who will introducing and presenting this report. Over to you, Simone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the terms of reference were last updated for the board in 2019, so it is timely to review them again, and you do have a revised version attached with the report. And we've done this to ensure that the terms of reference remain fit for purpose and compliant with relevant legislation. The main features of the terms of reference have remained the same. So some of the fundamentals around frequency of meetings and membership haven't changed. What we've done mainly through this review is provide some further detail and clarity, particularly in relation to the role and the function of the board. We've tried to highlight those main changes at, I think, paragraph 6 onwards of the covering report, but I'll just pick them up briefly. So we've added some further information around the duties of board members and expectations of board members. There's some extra clarification on who can sit on the board, both employee and employer reps, and the terms of office. There is some further detail on the appointment process, then how the AGM operates, and then also some further information on how recommendations can be moved and amendments moved during the meeting. But as I said, that none of those changes kind of fundamentally change the substance of the terms of reference. It is largely to provide some additional detail. So with that in mind, the board are asked to approve the terms of reference, and we have noted in the cover report that we will in future review them every 3 years from here on, or sooner if there needs to be, if there's any changes in legislation that requires a review sooner. But other than that, I shall leave it there, but obviously happy to take questions if there's any queries on the changes that we're proposing.
Thank you very much, Simone. And I've actually have not got any comments as such. Very happy with the terms of references, and noted the small changes. By the way, I've just went silent, so I had to come back in. So I don't know what you said, but I'm not opposed to recommending the terms of references for approval, but I would just like to put a thought for discussion on the table. Now, noting the very heavy load of the agenda today, and it is an awful lot of taking in and reading, etc., etc. And I know this is because of circumstances today. It's not always like that, but the agenda on most meetings we have is quite heavy. So I'm not talking about immediately. I'm talking for after May, when we're in a new term, whether we could consider adding another meeting. Now, most of these items aren't just springing up. They're annual meetings. They have to be done. And I was wondering whether members agreed with me that we put it in the terms of reference in some shape or form, that we have actually 5 meetings a year instead of 4. If we do not need that 5th meeting, then that would be cancelled. But I don't think 5 meetings per year is the end of the world if it is for ease, and it gives all members of the pension board more time to consider all of the items giving them more time to consider the item. But I don't know what officers think to that either. So I just would like to put that on record for a short discussion and to see how everybody feels. If you don't agree with it, I shut up. But I feel this is the point, because in May there will be new county councillors election. It's when a new term starts, and that is when those terms would come in effect. So over to everybody. What do you think? Can I start? Richard and Manjit, you give me your comments first.
Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, I'm not standing again in the May election, so in a sense, I have no particular effect upon me in that case. But yes, I mean, I don't really mind either way. If 5 fits in with the cycle of meetings, and I know these are timed, aren't they, to coincide or with the local pension committee cycle of meetings. That's my thought to mention, perhaps. But certainly, from far I'm concerned, I'm happy with the same number or one more if it's appropriate and if it works. But having said that, of course, I shan't be here. So,
well, I know, but I'm just trying to gauge opinion and then let the officer answer. Manjit.
Yes, Chair. I think I'd be happy if there was another meeting, especially with, I think, the amount of things, as you said, need to be covered, and also things that are coming down the pipeline with regards to further changes, so they can be discussed in a bit more detail if needed. And yeah, I mean, 5 meetings would be fine for me as well, if it's okay with the officers as well.
Thank you. Officers, what do you think? Don't all rush. Simone, please.
If I just come back initially, I mean, I think the heavy agenda today is unusual. I don't think we've had the issue to quite the same extent previously, and I think it's just because of trying to ensure we've sort of avoided the election period. So I'm not convinced that the issue will continue in future years. That said, though, we could amend the terms of reference. At the moment, it says the board shall meet 4 times a year. We could amend that to up to 5 times a year potentially. So there's flexibility there if we don't need a 5th meeting, that we could cancel it. The terms of reference do also say that urgent meetings can be called by the chair as well at any time if there is business that can't wait to a future meeting. But perhaps, you know, to give us that flexibility, we could amend. I think it's 9.1 to up to 5 times.
Yeah. So yes, I'm aware that it says, you know, urgent meeting can be called, but you do not know what and how then to fit it in and whatever. And there are then limitation within the democratic service. So personally, I think maybe up to 5 meetings can be called. And if we set at the beginning of the council year 5 spots in the calendar, then one can always be cancelled. But it is for ease and for streamlining, isn't it? For something to work to. What do you think? Because an urgent meeting, if we decide today to have an urgent meeting, we might not necessarily get it into the democratic calendar or whatever else. So, but if there is one in, you can either take it on or you can leave it.
And that's fine. So if the board are happy and agree with that, we can amend 9.1 from 4 to 5. But I would suggest maybe putting the board shall meet up to 5 times a year if there's no objection to that.
Angie, as you are the one who's got to do it, comments please.
I can't possibly comment, Chair. It's not in my remit to comment. It's up to the board to decide whether they want it or not with officers.
It's not asking you for a decision. I'm asking you for whether
we could factor it into the new committee timetable.
Okay, good.
As Mr. Shepherd said, it was usually around the cycle of local pension committee meetings, so they would need to be looked at as well without too much disruption to that meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So may I suggest that we accept the terms of reference and leave it to officers' delegation to look at this point raised for inclusion if possible. Is that acceptable to you, Simone? Yes,
that's fine, Chair.
Thank you. So thank you very much for that. And hang on. So I've got to go to my back to my agenda. So thank you all for that. And that after comments. Oh, are there any more comments and questions on the report before I move on? Okay, Ruth. Oh, sorry, Ruth, I forgot to ask you.
No, I'm fine. In
okay,
terms of
I'm so
being
sorry. I didn't. Okay, over to you then.
I just got a question of yourself in relation to 9.3, which was the meeting procedures. And it sets out there, because it's not a committee, you know, it can be held either remotely or in person. And I didn't know whether you had any plans to maybe have at least 1 meeting a year in person, or will they continue to be held remotely?
I have got no problems with having at least one meeting a year in person. You know, if you feel that that is, you know, something we should look at, I'm happy to do that. Now, Richard's got his hand up. So are you putting that forward for as a suggestion?
Yes, I think it would be good maybe for at least once. And I think when we had the training, which has been in person, I think it sort of came up as a suggestion from some of the members at that forum.
Yes.
But obviously, you know, I'll go with the consensus of the board, but it was just a suggestion.
Yes, very nice background, by the way. What I suggest, and then Richard and Manjit can come in, and then obviously Simone. I suggest rather than putting it in the terms of reference, to put it into the unofficial agenda that our AGM will always be held or will be held in person with agreement of the chairman. And then while we are there, we can also have some training after. So it is a, you know, it is a good day's work. Over to Richard. What are you saying?
Thank you. Again, of course, with saying I shan't be here next year, but I'm an enthusiast for using IT remote meeting wherever possible for the reasons of time saving and travel saving and so on, travel time saving. I just wonder what the particular advantage might be of the in-person meeting. I recall the training was held in person because it wasn't possible because of the IT to hold them remotely, but the last training that Aspire Hymans ran, where they made the effort to be interactive, I found very useful. Again, that was done remotely. So, you know, I'm not, you know, violently opposed to anything, but I just wonder what the budget would be of an in-person meeting if we can meet remotely.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, like I just suggested, to do it a hybrid, the meeting followed by maybe Hyman's training. Manjit, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I like the idea of, you know, meeting once a year together, and also your idea is a really good one in terms of adding to that the training element, making hybrid, which gives it more value as well for being there. And spending the time to get there and come back as well. So I'm okay with that suggestion. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Right. So as there are only 3 members, Richard, you're outvoted. Angie, over to you. Is that possible to arrange that?
We could decide, Chair, which one at the beginning of the year so that we can organise a venue for it in the County Hall.
Yes, but in order to make it worthwhile, as Richard said, could we, if we do have an in-person meeting, that we do add some training sessions with Hymans or so after the meeting, so then, you know, we're having one journey, we interact, we learn, and we save resources at that point. Is that possible?
Ian, could you respond?
Ian,
would it be possible to have Hyman's training after the meeting, would it?
We can certainly organise training after the event, Councillor Page, no problem. Whether it's Hyman's, that will be dependent on what the particular topic is and obviously the cost involved, but we can certainly arrange training. Either officers could do training, or we could run through a review or a revision of any of the Hyman's elements that we've done in the past. So we can certainly come up with something that would work. But whether it's Hyman's per se, I'd rather not commit to that at this point. Is that okay?
But as we are likely after May to have new members, we're going to have to go through the modules again anyway. So whether you run them or anybody runs them, but if everybody is there, because we know how much, you know, and I think that if you're saying that is possible, you know, anyway, that is fine. Now, the next hand up is Richard and then Anthony.
I shall accept defeat graciously.
Okay, accept defeat. Anthony.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I may have missed something, but I thought there was a possibility that there might not be elections in May.
Anthony, I do not think so, because it is virtually impossible. I'm working from the assumption that, well, we will get notification on Thursday for certain, but I'm working on the assumption there will be elections, and we're going to have to work on what we know. If there's anything, you know, that will be different. But obviously, I do not know for certain, but the rumour is we might not be in the first tranche. So I can see us as a county council going for another 4 years before we will be replaced by a new unitary authority. So let's deal with that when we get to it. Richard, is that a historic hand, or are we coming back in?
Sorry, historic. It should be lower.
Okay. Okay. So, Ruth, back to you. Are you happy? Ruth? Hello?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
There you are. Ruth, are you happy if we do not change the terms of reference, but because it really says that we can, you know, or the chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might not be the chairman, but, you know, that there is every year one in-person meeting, you know, whether it be the AGM or whatever, and that is combined with training. Yeah? Ruth is happy, Richard's happy, Manjit's happy, Anthony is happy. So, Angie, could you please note that? And then, you know, we go forward with that idea.
I've noted, Chair.
Thank you. That is wonderful. So that's item 5. And the board is approving the terms of reference as appended, with the delegation to officers to look at, I think it was 9.1. Is that agreed by everybody?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Manjit.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes, agreed.
That is unanimously agreed. Moving on to the next item, which is on your pages 21 to 36. And that is the Pension Fund Administration Report, October to December 24, quarter 3. And that is over to Ian. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I'm very aware that is a large agenda today, so I wasn't going to go through every element of this. I was going to pick out the key points, if that's okay. But you can see from the information there is an awful lot going on in pensions at the moment. We're extremely busy with a number of areas of work, plus obviously ongoing business as usual. So I'm going to pick out the key areas. This, as Chair says, covers the period October to December 24. I'd like to take you straight to page 35 of the pack, if I may, which is where we have the KPIs. And I just want to quickly go through those with you, if I may, please. Just bear with me. So the KPIs in the period, looking at those, the business process perspectives, that's the 3 on the left-hand side. I think it shows that we are beginning to stabilise. The effects of McLeod have been significant, as board have known for well over a year now. But it feels to me as though we're beginning to stabilise. The retirement benefits within 10 days are 80% for the period, 81 in the quarter before. So that seems to have reached a stable position now. The pension payments within 10 working days have actually increased up to 94%. So that's only 1% off where the original KPI is set. So that really feels as though we're almost back where we need to be on that. The death benefits, they're still well below target. The target's 90%. We achieved 59%, which is still some way off, but that's a significant increase from 51 the quarter before. So again, we are showing the direction of travel positively, but there is still a long way to go, is what I just want to say on KPIs. The ones on the right-hand side of the table, which is the customer perspective, all of those still remain pretty positive, really. They're all above or close to target. So although it's extremely challenging and continues to be so, the customer perspective remains good. So I'm generally pleased with where we're going on that. I just wanted to sort of highlight that because I know that has been a concern of the board in the past few quarters, and quite understandably so. The next things I kind of wanted to talk about, but please feel free if there's any bits that I miss here, if you want me to go back to. But the next thing I wanted to just touch on was the audits. That's on page 25 of the report. We had 4 audits in the quarter, which is significant, really. We don't normally have quite as many as that, but we had 4, and we had pensions increase, pension contribution collections, and pension transfers, and there were no recommendations on any of those 3, which is very encouraging. The 4th one was the pension contribution banding changes. There was an audit recommendation that we do a greater sample of testing on cases. There wasn't a consideration of any sort of problems as such, but they just wanted us to do a greater sample, which we've agreed to, and that work is taking place currently. The next thing I wanted to mention also, reading on from there on page 26, is the further education bodies LGPS guarantee. This was a new change that came in the quarter, and effectively what's happening, or what has happened, I should say, the Department for Education, the DfE, have put in place a guarantee in respect of further education bodies who participate in the LGPS, and that has allowed us to sort of review the risk category rating of those employers, and those employers are listed there. They're the 5 employers within point 28. That work has been done with Hymans, the fund actuary, and because we've actually now been able to slightly de-risk those employers because of the new guarantee, the employer rates for those 5 employers have slightly fallen by 1.5% from April 25. Those employers have been written to and informed of that, and they're making changes to the payroll system to ensure that the correct contributions move ahead. So we have 5 employers who are paying slightly less, but the fund is considered. The fund considers these lower risk employers now, which is overall good for the fund. Work on the pension website, which is on page 27 of the pack, continues. We're in the process at the moment of reviewing the content, and that will be completed by March, and then we move further into the project, which is detailed in point 40. I know at the last board meeting, the board asked for sort of an illustration of how that's going to work, and that's detailed in point 37. So we don't want to basically reinvent information and duplicate information that's already in existence, because it just means when a change is made nationally, then we would have to change our information as well. So we're going to use where there's national information already there. We're going to use those websites and then build our own in the middle. So what we're effectively doing is we're using the LGA website for predominantly employer information. We're using the LGPS member website predominantly for member information. And then the part in the middle, what we've called the core website, is effectively where we're going to detail the Leicestershire Fund policies and processes, And where we use the member self-service, where members can log in and see their own annual benefit statements and run their own benefit calculations, that's the area that we're going to be working with Hymans on the replacement, which is what they call the Engage system. So that's the way it's going to link together. And that will take quite a long time to all pull together, and it's proposed that we'll be going live in very early 2026. But that work continues. The next significant area of work that's been ongoing is the Pension Regulator Code of Practice update. This has been a really significant piece of work. It's taken a lot of time. Stuart, one of my colleagues in particular, has spent a great deal of time working on this, and I think credit goes to Stuart for all the work he's done on this. He's completed a number of areas within this. This is checking to ensure that our fund meets the Code of Practice, and all the areas have completed and now detailed in point 42 of that report. There's one position outstanding as at the 16th of January, and that relates to processes that are set out in the code relating to managing advisors and service providers. This covers a number of elements, and most are fully compliant. The remaining aspects will be followed up prior to the next board meeting. But I think from where we were to where we are now, a significant move forward, and we are fully compliant in almost every area now, which is really good. In terms of the documentation, that is actually covered in a further report later on in the agenda, and I take Chair's point about this being a big agenda, but you can see that this is why this particular area is a fairly unique change for this particular period of time, and that we'll come back to that later in the agenda. Stuart will cover that later on. Moving ahead, the additional voluntary contribution AVC framework work continues, and we are expecting to go we're expecting to be able to launch this by the end of February, which is at the end of this month. So we're nearly there on that. It's taken longer than we anticipated, but that's because we've been working through the governance of this and the legal requirements. But we are nearly ready, and we'll be able to launch that tender shortly. McCloud and dashboards. McCloud continues. An enormous piece of work that I won't go through again. You've heard me talk about McCloud significantly, but we're getting close to sort of timelines now about sort of deadlines. We have to get the exercise effectively wrapped up for active members so they can be included in their annual benefit statement by the end of August this year. That might not seem far away, but there is still a significant amount of work to do before we can get to that point. That work continues. Dashboards, I would say we're in a very, very strong position on dashboards. This is point 55 onwards in the report at the bottom of page 30. Dashboards, we're in a good position. We have the integrated service provider, the ISP, in place with Haywards, the system provider. Initial testing is actually completed already, and we're actually working through that. Haywards are now going to provide us with what they call a dashboard data readiness report, and that will help us to identify where match records need to be worked through. But we are in a good position. I'd say we're ahead of most funds in this area, so we're doing really well on dashboards. Another area I did want to just mention is the employer risk. I wasn't going to dwell on this particularly, but there is some really strong activity taking place in this area. The position in the report was the position as at the 7th of January. And at that time, we only had 3 unsigned, uncompleted admission agreements that relate to the current financial year. And that's probably the best we've been as at coming up to a year end. But in the last 2 weeks, we've received 9 new cases, 1 from a county maintained school, 1 from a city maintained school, and 7 from academies. So we now have 12. So we have the 9 new ones plus the 3 existing ones. So work is now seriously committed to resolving these admissions in time for year end. It's something we've been through many times before, but I wasn't expecting such a sudden increase in the last 2 weeks. That's completely come out of the blue, and we weren't expecting that. So obviously more work is going on in this area now, which is unfortunately taking resource away from other areas that we were originally planning. That is all I was going to say, Chair. Obviously happy to take any questions from yourself or from the board, or indeed if there's any points I didn't cover, but I just wanted to pick out the key areas for today. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you so very much, Stuart. And obviously there is an awful lot of information, as always, in there. And what is absolutely amazing, it is the kind of work that has gone into, you know, between now and the last meeting as well. What I found extremely amazing was that there are, what did it say in the report, 3,200 lines that have to be manually entered, you know, which is no, you know, small feast. But I think you picked up for me all of the salient points. I was a little bit confused over the website structure with you, which you explained. And I think it is absolutely fantastic that, except for one, we are fully compliant. In regards of the employer's risk, before I go over to the other members, as per usual, I put it on record that you have delegated powers to write the letters and take the necessary steps to follow it up. And with that, Ruth had her hand up first, followed by Manjit. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for the report and everything that it covers. It's very comprehensive, and please pass on our thanks to the team. I think as an employee representative, I think you probably expect me to ask this next question. In relation to the KPIs, and particularly for those members that are retiring, obviously, you know, employees obviously don't always appreciate all the other aspects of the work that the team have to undertake, and they're very, very, very much focused on, I've worked for a number of years and you know, I'd like to know what my pension's going to be. Reading the further papers, I know that in your business plan it talks about an uplift of 2.5 FTEs for the team going forward. I suppose my question would be, do you feel that that is sufficient given the number of significant work streams that you have, and will that give you the capacity that you need to improve the sort of KPIs around, you know, notification of members in terms of their retirements?
Thanks, Ruth. I do think 2.5 will have a significant impact, Ruth, because the 2.5 we're actually pitching at pension officer level, which is more senior than pension assistant level, which we've normally pitched at, Ruth. The reason we're trying to go at a higher level is to try and cover some of the more detailed work and things like that. What I mean by that, Ruth, is things like transfers, divorce, retirements, deaths. It's these areas where there is greater complexity that's been brought around by McLeod and things of that nature. So I do think it will have a significant impact. Alongside a lot of training we're also doing, Ruth, for the newer members as well. We're doing a significant amount of work on training newer members to bring them up to speed. So I think the two things in conjunction, Ruth, whilst we do have a significant amount of work to do, I do think that was make a significant impact on that particular point, which is ultimately getting the benefits to members, which is completely agree with you, Ruth, that the bread and butter and has to be the focus. So I do think it would make significant difference, but I will continue to monitor that. But I do think it will make a real help for us. I do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth, for that question. Manjit.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Manjit.
And as usual, I think the information provided is excellent. And having worked with you for over several years, I know all the effort that's gone into building up that team that you have, and they're a brilliant team. You know, I've said this a few times, but I'll reiterate that again. Doing really, really good work. My questions were sort of linked to what Ruth has said already, because I was on a course last week, and you know, the online one, and they raised a few issues from the people who are there on the course about their planning for the future as well, taking into account what you've done as well, which is looking at the impact of dashboards, McLeod, being ready for the future, fit for the future, all those wonderful things that are, you know, coming along, and impacts of legislation changes, etc. And they, just as an example, just, you know, you may already be aware of it, that what Avon Pension Fund have done is they've done, they've assessed what they need for the future, and they've actually, like you have done, suggested additional FTE. But what they've looked at is even adding additional FTE for what they call a business change team.
Yes, I've
And
seen
also,
that, Manjit.
You've seen that,
Yeah.
and digital services team as well.
They have, yeah. They've
yeah.
kind of they're developing their own project team, aren't they, as well,
Yes,
specifically
that's right,
for things like IT and moving projects forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in quite a strong position on that, Manjit, already. I will be honest, because Stuart, who is obviously on the call today, his team are the improvement team. So we have an element of Stuart and his colleagues working on sort of project-based. I appreciate they're not specific project managers, which I know something Avon are developing, Manjit, and I know other funds are looking at the same. But we do have some element of robustness and resilience there already. But it is something, Manjit, I am aware of, and I will continue to keep that on board, particularly around the IT side, Manjit. I do accept that point. Yeah.
And I think particularly on the IT side, it was also linked to cybersecurity as well, because that's a huge area of risk potentially going forward with changes that are coming along that we have to implement on the IT side, other side. And then again, as you're fully aware, with the processes that we then need to change as well. So it's just to make you aware of that, and I'm sure you, as you said, you've looked into that, which is fine. I think you covered everything else in answer to Ruth's question, so that's really helpful. But again, thank you for all the efforts of your team, and please pass on our thanks as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjit. Thanks for the comments. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ruth and Manjit. Are there any further comments, observations on agenda item 6? There are none. So the recommendation is on page 34 of the agenda. This item and report will go next to the local pension committee. And with that, we agree the recommendation. All agreed?
Agreed.
Yes.
All agreed.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you very much, members. The next item on the agenda is page 37 to 62. Agenda item 7, pension fund business plan and budget on page 37 to 62, as I just said. And it is over to Simone again, who will be presenting this report. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, as you've already heard, presents the business plans for the pension fund for the next financial year. You've got 2 appendices with the business plans. You've got an administration business plan and an investment business plan. There's also the budget for next year and a training plan as well. So in terms of the administration business plan, which is Appendix A, the main priorities that you'll see in there, and actually Ian's mentioned a couple of them already. Obviously, we've got the ongoing implementation of McLeod and the sort of pressures that continues to put on the team. We've got the implementation of the National Pensions Dashboard, which we're still working on. Then, of course, this year we are working towards a triennial valuation process, and there's several of the fund's contracts that we need to review over the next few months as well. So they're the main priorities for the administration elements. Then at Appendix B, you have the investment business plan. That covers 5 main areas as it has done in previous years, so it will look quite similar to that you've had before. So it covers training, policies. So and the two main ones there are the net zero policy and the investment strategy statement. It also then covers asset allocation, fund valuation and reporting. So you'll see through those sections various actions for the team over the next 12 months. Both of the business plans also make reference to the government's Fit for the Future consultation, which we will cover later on in the agenda, but we've just made mention of that in terms of the need to respond to any outcomes from that consultation during the year, or whenever that may be. We don't yet have any timescales from government for that. Then if I just move on, the next part of the report, so sections 7 onwards, you've got the proposed budget for the fund for 25-26. And as always, it's just important to remember that this is independent of the council's general fund budget. It is a separate area of the budget. You've got a table at paragraph 18 that shows the budget. It shows the current year budget and forecast, and you've got the budget through to 26-27, and it breaks down the kind of main areas of the budget. So it shows what the investment management costs are forecast to be, and that is a significant element of the budget. We've also got LGPS Central's costs, although they haven't yet been confirmed, and then other elements such as staffing, support, and then the actuarial costs as well. And as Ian's already mentioned, we have included 2.5 additional FTE in the budget, primarily to deal with those McLaren pressures. And then just touching on the investment management costs, that is one of the most significant elements. The fund does use a range of investment managers for its assets, and we do pay a fee for that service, which is what you're seeing in the budget. You have got some more detail on the various elements of those costs in paragraph 12. And those costs are variable, so they will vary depending on the type of investments that we've got during the year. Also performance, because there's a performance element to the fee. So the better returns that the managers are getting for us, the higher the fee element for that will be. And they will also vary as our assets under management increase as well. So the more assets we've got, the higher our fees will likely be in cash terms. And you can see actually in the table, towards the bottom of the table, the total admin costs as a proportion of our assets under management. And you can see over the years that it is largely static across the medium term. So whilst costs are rising with inflation, they are staying a similar proportion in terms of our assets also rising. And the report does cover a lot more detail about the different budget headings, but I won't go through all of them. Just to mention, as I've already briefly touched on, the budget for LGPS Central hasn't yet been approved for next year, so we have just built some estimates in at the moment. There is a shareholder meeting to discuss the budget on the 25th of February, so we will know more after that. I shall leave it there, I think. The committee is asked to approve the report, the budget, the business plans and the training plans, but also happy to take any questions, and I'm sure Bhulesh and Ian can support that if needed as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I personally have got no questions except a stupid clarification, if I may, because you are talking about the investment cost on paragraph 12. Now, does that relate to point 37 and point 38? Because it says 80% of the budget is investment managers' expenses. Is that a choice of word? Because expenses I see as, food, lunches and whatever. Is that the cost? And also, you see, what I'm saying, it is that I assume is what you mean as you explained in paragraph 12 and the thing. And then on point 38, because it then mentions management investment costs. So because that reads, I thought it is different, but it is not. It's just a choice of words, is it?
That's exactly right. The references to investment management expenses further down just relate to those investment management costs that you see in the table up paragraph 8. So it is the fees that we pay our investment managers for dealing with our assets.
Thank you.
Okay.
So over to Ruth, Anthony, Manjit, Richard. Don't make Simone's life easy. There are no questions. Thank
you.
Thank you, Simone. So that concludes the agenda item 7 with the attached appendices of the individual reports. And we note the business plan, pension fund budget and the training plan. And is that agreed, members? Can you please agree that? Thank you, Manjit.
Agreed.
Yes, agreed.
Thank
Agreed.
you. That is unanimously agreed because all your lights lit up. And that brings it without further ado to Stuart. Agenda item 8, page 63 to 236. And that's the pension fund policy report. Stuart, thank you very much. Nice to see you, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Morning, everyone. Right, this is the fourth time I think I've presented the pension fund policy report to the board, and it does seem to get bigger and bigger every year. This year, it's of course down to the work that's been ongoing in the last 6 months, in particular, relating to the pension regulators code of practice. So a lot of the work has been linked to the governance, and we've had the opportunity to tighten up on that. So there's been various documents that have been added. So going forward, the reviews of the policy and the code will align, ensuring that the fund continues to comply with the requirements. This report is also going forward will also include any breaches of law that occurred during the previous tax year that may be considered material. So happy to report that in 24-25 there were no breaches that were considered to be material. I'll focus on the documents that have been created in relation to the code of practice, but happy to take questions on any areas. The first one I wanted to mention was point 16, the conflict of interest policy. So a lot of work has been done by Democratic Services around this, including and the information has been added to the website. It includes the requirement to publish members' declarations of interest, and that's all there now on the website. The cyber policy, that this again seems to appear every year, as we're keen to keep a strong focus on this. So once again, we've made a couple of minor changes. We've actually removed some of the content that was there previously on advice from technical security. So we've created an internal document that contains some of the information that's perhaps we don't necessarily want to make public. And we've also added a couple of areas as well in terms of clarifications. One regarding how the information is backed up every night, and another point to point out that staff aren't allowed to access their own records. We've also refreshed complaints and monitoring contributions, and they're there to take a look at. Again, none of this is new in terms of process, but it's really just making sure that the governance is refreshed and kept up to date. We've also included the data improvement plan in the list of policies, but I shall cover that separately in the report after this. And then we've also added a brand new internal controls document, which again is going to be not a public facing document, but it covers all the areas linked to controls within the code of practice. So again, there's quite a bit there, but it does allow us to point to this document and demonstrate that we are carrying out the necessary controls that we need to have in place to align with the code of practice. And then the final one on the list related to the overview of transfer payments. Again, it's an internal document to strengthen compliance. and we'll be going through that in a little more detail after the meeting, just to talk through the various diligence that the fund takes before making payment. So that was really all I wanted to say on this report. The recommendation is for comments ahead of the pension committee, which is due next month.
Thank you again, Stuart. And I do not want to be disappointing by saying I have got no questions and comments, rather than to be complimentary. I have found that yours and Ian's reports and explanations have always been so comprehensive and so well that it sort of made it very much self-explanatory. Even so, it is a very confusing subject and content at times. So thank you again, and I go over to members, and there is Manjit. Manjit, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Stuart. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks, Manjit. Yeah, I hope you are as well.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Great work again, Stuart. Just something that triggered in my mind as Chair mentioned, the sort of the challenges, I guess you're alluding to, that we face in the world. And I wonder whether, in terms of managing our risks, and that we've taken into account potentially how we position ourselves with all the trade issues are looming in the future potentially, and then how they impact on our investments. Is there a sort of a thought to that, to maybe consider that and see how we position ourselves for that, or is that just way too uncertain at the moment?
There's perhaps colleagues on the call that might be better placed to answer that one. I think. Thank you, Bhulesh.
Bhulesh, okay, yeah, sorry.
I'll let you jump in there, sir.
Bhulesh, jump in there. And good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Mrs. Page.
Morning,
hi, Manjit. I'll try my best to answer that in the sense that it's a matter for the committee in the main and our investment advisor. So we take advice once a year to a January committee where we consider the strategy. Now, given that we're a very long-term fund, we will have seen things like this, of this nature, numerous times. Not exactly the same, but just as important, you'd argue, things around investing in China, for example, or Russian exposure, two recent things that have come to mind. Now, all of these risks are similar in that kind of nature, in the sense that the proposed investment downside risk exists, which is why we have a very diversified portfolio. So we'd like to think that we're not overly exposed to any one geography, sector, for example. And as our fund currently stands, we have exposures to listed equities, private equities, property, infrastructure. Now, all of these things can be impacted in various ways by tariffs, for example, but in the long run, we're a cash flow positive fund. We're an open fund. We'd like to believe that our asset allocation is diversified enough to withstand most shocks.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. Yeah, just wanted to make sure I knew you were managing it, but just to get a view of how things are going as well on that front. That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and if you're interested, the January's meeting of the local pension committee has a report on the strategy that was proposed and recommended. That was only a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There are no other hands up. That means no other questions. And are we happy to agree the recommendation on page 68 on agenda item 8? And that is to repeat on revised policy strategies ahead of the local pension committee on the 14th of March. Do we all agree the recommendation on page 68? Yes,
Agreed.
thank you. That is unanimous again. All the lights have gone up. So without further to-do, Stuart, we are going to item 9 on our agenda, which is on pages 237 to 244, and that's record keeping, data improvement, and it is Stuart again. Over to you, Stuart, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to keep the board informed of our plans to maintain and improve the quality of data held on our pension system during the year ahead. So once again, this is linked to the code of practice. Once again, these are processes that are already in place and have been in place for some time, but it's just a case of formalising this. So what we've got here is the various processes that we do on a day-to-day basis to ensure high quality pension data is kept, is detailed in the appendix. That the main purpose of the report proper is to talk about the specific plans ahead, and we've got 3 categories really here, one of which you won't be surprised to learn is McCloud. The other one is pension dashboards, and the first area covered in the report is the 2025 valuation. So work has already been ongoing with preparing for the valuation throughout 2024, and it continues into 2025. 2024, the focus was on the stabilised employers, the councils, and we moved to the non-stabilised employers during this year, and we're continuing to monitor casework to ensure that we keep up on top of cases so that benefits held on records are calculated and kept up to date. We prioritise cases that are likely to have the highest impact on the valuation. So this would generally be those members with the largest level of pension benefits. But we also like to strike a balance to make sure that other cases are processed as well. One of the ways that we improve data quality ahead of the valuation is to use the Hymans online data portal, which highlights various issues with records, and we can work through and make sure that they're all addressed. And new for this year, Hymans have offered, and we've accepted, for an advanced data review to take place. So this is an exercise that Hymans will use to assess how valuation ready the fund's data is. So we have asked them to take a look at that, and we're expecting to hear from them in time to report on this in the next board meeting. I think Ian's already touched upon the pension dashboard program, and yeah, again, we will be focusing on that in the year ahead. The pension dashboards readiness assessment from Haywards, we're expecting to receive that this week, and that will give us a bit of a steer in terms of any areas that we need to ensure are in decent condition ahead of the launch of the dashboards exercise. And we'll also continue to work with Prudential on the AVC data. Once again, we're waiting to hear from Haywards in terms of how the data that Prudential will provide us that is required for the dashboard exercise will match with our Altair records so that we can load that information onto our systems. So again, that's a key focus for the year ahead. And as Ian's already touched upon, the work around McCloud, again, don't wish to harp on about McCloud too much, but we are looking to ensure that bulk uploads of data are then added to the records to allow us to meet the statutory requirement for this underpin information to be included on annual benefit statements that are due in the summer. So those are the main three areas, in addition to the business as usual data improvement areas. So the recommendation is that the board notes the report, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. And again, Stuart, these reports keep growing and growing. My question is on page, and it is a very simple one actually, 242, you refer to monthly reports on the mortality, on iConnect and whatever. So is that just something we do because it's prudent to do so, or is that a legal requirement? Because it seems to, whilst I think it's prudent, but it's an awful lot of work. Just talk me around it for a bit of interest. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a statutory requirement. It would certainly be good practice, and we've had a contract with a mortality screening provider for several years, and yeah, they give us a report each month. They provide a report each month which highlights those records where they believe the person has died and they think it's one of ours. So they will give us a couple of sort of RAG ratings, if you like, to say that these are extremely likely to be your members, and we think they've passed away. And then there's another rating that tells us these are probably your members, but we can't be 100% sure. So with both categories, we will then do some work around it. A fair number of these we will already be aware of because we would have been told about from the family. But where we're not aware of, what we're keen to do is to ensure that A, this is our pensioner, and B, we're also keen to ensure that where any overpayment of pension is taking place, that we suspend that pension whilst investigations are ongoing. So where we're not sure, the initial process would be to contact that member, and we tend to write to them and say that we're undergoing a data update, and we just want to make sure that you are the member that is receiving the pension, and if you can let us know quite quickly. So in the event that it is our member, that it isn't our member, the member will reply and say, yes, here I am, everything's okay. We don't write to them and say we think you've passed away. It's a far more generic letter than that. But where we don't get a response, then we will suspend the pension. And if the member is alive, they tend to come back fairly quickly to ask why their pension hasn't been paid. But where they aren't alive, then it allows us to proceed further. And in the event of any overpayment of pension, we will investigate steps to try and recover any overpayment that's taken place. So that's something we do every month. In addition to that, there is the National Fraud Initiative that takes place every 2 years, where we ask for extra reports in respect of the National Fraud Initiative as well, just to make sure we haven't missed any cases. So we try very hard to stay on top of that, to minimise any overpayments to the fund as much as possible. And where there are overpayments, we take all reasonable steps to try and recover that money.
Very, 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 I would say, resource-intensive process, because there are very long lists of monthly, bi-monthly and whatever checks, but definitely very, very prudent. Thank you for that. I see no other hands up. Can I ask again? Any questions? Any comments? No, Manjit is clapping. He's really got this IT worked out. I don't. So thank you for agenda item 9. We note the report, and yes, everybody in agreement with that?
It's agreed.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes, all the lights have gone up.
Agreed, yes.
So, yes, thank you very much. So that's unanimously agreed again. And we are going over to agenda item 10, which is on page 245 to 266, and that is Fit for the Future consultation responses. And it is over to Simone. Thank you very much, Simone.
Thank
Over to
you.
you.
Thank you again. So this report sets out the fund's response to the Fit for the Future consultation. You've got it attached to the appendix. This has already been submitted because the deadline was 16th of January. So it was submitted after consultation with the committee chair. So today it's for information and noting, really. The government proposals are largely aimed at making further progress with pooling because they see benefits in doing that. And the main proposals in relation to pooling are to fully delegate implementation of investment strategies to the pool. So that would be the Leicestershire Pension Fund delegating that to LGPS Central as things stand. Also take principal advice or principal investment advice from the pool as well. And then also transfer legacy assets to the pool by 31st of March 2026, which is quite a tight timescale, especially given some of our investment assets are longer term. So under the proposals, funds would still set an asset allocation strategy, so set out those high-level objectives, but then investments themselves would be made by the pool rather than the fund. Under the proposals, the funds would also have to set out an approach to local investment, although I think it's fair to say that from the consultation, the definition of what will be classed as local investment is still unclear. We think it will be quite broad, but it's not overly clear yet. And it also refers to having to set a target for local investment as well. But again, it's unclear how that target would need to be set and over what sort of area it would need to be set. The proposal suggests that funds would need to set a high level objective for local investment, but we don't yet know whether that would be for, say, the Leicestershire area or whether it would be for the wider pool. The consultation is quite detailed. There were a number of questions. I'm not going to go through all of them. Those kind of pooling elements were the ones that I wanted to draw to your attention particularly, but you have got the full response in the pack. And then I guess in terms of the fund's main areas of our response, we are largely supportive of the proposals, and we again do recognise the benefits of pooling, but we do think there are a number of challenges that the proposals as currently drafted would give us. So we have tried to suggest some solutions for overcoming some of those challenges, and you can see those in the introduction to the response. We've drawn those out. One of the main areas of concern or request is that the fiduciary duty should be extended to pools. So if pools are going to have that responsibility for investing assets on the fund's behalf in it to a greater extent, then they also should have that fiduciary duty. We also have said that the fund should retain a remit to set those high-level investment objectives and also have a choice as to where we get some of that investment advice rather than having to be mandated that comes from the pool. And also a concern that legacy assets should be transferred in a cost-effective way. So to transfer them in that timescale might incur costs, and some potentially quite high costs. And we're saying that ought to be taken into account when deciding when and how to transfer those assets, so that we're not putting a cost burden onto the fund and ultimately affecting the funding level. So I think they're the main elements of the response that has been submitted. As I've said, we haven't yet had any further timescales back from government as to when they will respond to those consultation and what the next steps might be. So we're just now waiting for further information back from government on this. But happy to take any questions. I'm sure Bulesh and Kat can come in on any technical questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simone. And again, you answered all my questions I jotted down last night. The only thing, and everything else is in the extensive paperwork and, you know, an explanation around it. But before I go to Richard, who's got his hand up, what is your prognosis going forward? What do you think the time scale is? And will there be what I call a transition period? Or, you know, will it be a straight, I can't quite get my head around it, or like a shadow board, or will there be a straight from A to B transition, or how is this going to be worked? If you can just, you know, explain that to a simple mind, please.
Yeah, the government haven't really set proposals for any transition out, actually, other than saying that, well, they're proposing that assets would be transferred by March 2026, and that any fund that doesn't have the appropriate registered with the appropriate financial regulator would need to do that in the same timescale. So it is quite an ambitious timescale, but there is no further information on any transition or what the practicalities of that will be. I think we're waiting for government to respond first to the consultation proposals to actually say whether they're going to go ahead with them. But it does appear that they do have quite an ambitious timescale if they're looking at the asset transfer within the next 12 months or so.
Like everything else. And in your opinion, what would be the greatest risk to us?
I think a couple of things. One is that issue around costs over transferring legacy assets. That if we do need to do that in a very quick way, that might not be the most cost effective. And then I guess the other issue for us is that kind of the tension between the fund setting its investment objectives, but then delegating all responsibility for then investing the assets to the pool, and that kind of potential lack of accountability then between the pool and the decisions they make around where they're putting members' money, and how but Leicestershire potentially would still then have that responsibility and accountability to our members, but the fund is the pool is the one that's made the decisions about where to put the cash, and it sort of just separate that accountability between the two. So and that's why we're asking for that fiduciary duty to be extended so that the pool has the same accountability as the fund currently does.
So to me, we are actually giving our assets away, and for a simple term, from a private enterprise, we are going to be a national enterprise in a kind of way, you know.
It's not, it's still within the central pool area, so it's not national in that sense. It's pooling with LGPS Central, which is contain a number of funds, but it's not on a national basis. And I guess it's the decision-making responsibility of where so it's not necessarily giving our assets away, but it's the decision-making responsibility about how our assets will be invested. So the fund will only have so much remit to do that. So we'll set some very high-level objectives, but then the pool, which will be LGPS Central, will make those decisions.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. And the last discussion really is addressing what I want to ask, but I do want to ask one further question. I note Simone's words largely supportive. I've seen the letter which has gone with the various requirements or caveats. Can I put my question like this, really? Focusing on the fund's objective, or main objective, of having enough money to pay members' benefits, could Simone just summarise in a sentence or two, if possible, what are the benefits, what are the disbenefits of pooling in terms of that fund's key objective, i.e. having enough money to pay members' benefits when they require them?
In terms of the benefits, pooling does help reduce costs, and you saw in one of the previous items that in terms of the fund's budget, our investment management costs they make up, I think it's about 80% of the budget, and costs will reduce with pooling because the costs are shared, over a greater number of assets, and then may well be economies of scale as well from greater pooling. I guess in terms of the disbenefits, there is potentially less flexibility for funds to make decisions that might suit their own circumstances. And particularly, I think we've had some issues in the past where we may set some objectives around where we want to invest some of our assets, and actually the pool doesn't have an investment suitable for what we want. So that's some of the reasons why we haven't got as much of our assets invested in the pool, because actually they can't offer everything that we might want. And I think that's an issue that potentially would continue. But I don't know, Bhulesh or Kat, anything else you'd want to add to that? I'm sure Bhulesh has got some other points to add.
No, thank you. I was just going to add, I mean, I think what Simone's summarised there is pretty much where we stand. The governance burden should reduce for the fund. So instead of looking after 22 or so separate investment managers, we keep our eyes on LGPS Central, and they look at all the other underlying managers. So it removes a bit of the governance burden. The economies of scale part should be quite important. LGPS Central can negotiate with managers far strongly than we can. You know, when the Leicestershire Fund is looking to procure a product, we're looking at sometimes 60 million, 100 million, maybe 150 million at most. LGPS Central, on behalf of 8 separate local authorities, will be looking at 300, 400, 500 million at a time. So you can imagine that largest cost for us, which is those investment management costs, should be reduced over time as new investments are made. Yeah, and then that last part that Simone mentioned regarding really having a tailored investment strategy is a little bit removed. So that's a disbenefit, I suppose. Central would be looking to pick funds which they have scale with. At the minute, we're able to invest £50 million in a particular product because we think it offers us a really good risk reward. Central likely won't be able to invest in those types of products.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we state the obvious, really. It seems to be so important we keep our focus on making sure the fund always has enough money to pay member benefits. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
Right, that answered all our questions. I see no other hands up, and that concludes agenda item 10. Can we please all indicate whether we noted the consultation responses? And yes, yes. So that concludes agenda item 10, and we've noted the consultation responses as set out in the appendix, and we are now going to page, I have to look it up again, 267 to 276, agenda item 11, and that is the Net Zero Climate Strategy Progress Update. And that is our Kat. Welcome, Kat. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay, thanks, and morning, everyone. So yes, this is the kind of the update for the board on the latest climate risk management report that the committee saw in November, and also kind of show you some general activities and progress we've been making, and hopefully show some positive outcomes that we've already achieved. So taking it back slightly, kind of managing climate risk feeds well into our view on responsible investment. So how we integrate financially material, environmental, social and governance factors into our investment processes. So this has relevance both before investment decisions and kind of during while we hold these investments. And we see this as a core part of the fund's fiduciary duty. Important to say that this is quite distinct from ethical investment, which is where the moral persuasions of an organisation would take primacy over financial considerations, for example. So we do this in kind of 2 key areas. So through our sustainable investment, so we make a number of investments which have climate positive tilting. So we have investments in renewables, forestry, and kind of some equity funds which are tilted towards greener companies, away from kind of your classic less green companies. We also have kind of a very long-standing approach to stewardship and governance, so acting as responsible and active investors and owners, and we do this through our considered voting of shares and engaging with investment company management as part of the investment processes, and this is undertaken largely through LGPS Central, who have a really kind of strong stewardship team. So then the net zero climate strategy was approved back in March 2023. The board saw a draft of that and also helped feed into that alongside the consultation piece we did with members, kind of a long-standing approach with committee. And this was kind of based on a key framework from the net zero from the Institutional Investors Group for Climate Change, which is kind of seen as a leading framework for how investors should target net zero. So we created the strategy. That's the kind of headline target is net zero by 2050 with an ambition for sooner. And then there's another 8 targets below that, which are kind of measurable targets, which we track on an annual basis, which is kind of what feeds into this climate risk management report. So this is the latest, but the latest version of the climate risk management report went to committee in November. I've not appended it because I know you already have a really long agenda, but there is a link within the report if you kind of want to see more in depth from the report. So I've kind of just brought out some of the kind of key highlights, but the report focuses on kind of 4 key pillars, which are seen as kind of best practice in line with the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So how the fund manages the governance of climate risk and opportunities, its strategy, risk management, so how you kind of consider physical risks versus transition risks, and then our metrics and targets. So progress against the metrics and targets. The report in November, I think it is our snapshot as at 31st of March 2024, and we're really kind of pleased to see how much it's exceeded its initial expectations for our kind of in-scope investments. So one of our interim primary targets was to reduce the fund's weighted average carbon intensity by 50% by 2030 against our 2019 baseline. We've already reduced that carbon intensity by 52%. So that's a kind of metric which can show that we're less exposed to carbon price risk. So if a carbon price risk was to be introduced, the companies should be less affected by that. So it should be of less risk to the portfolio in general. Our second interim target was to achieve a 40% reduction in our financed emissions by 2030. This is already decreased by 40% from that 2019 baseline, and that's the fund's total financed emissions that we can attribute to the fund from our underlying holdings. So see, that's kind of what we'd want to see to reduce despite having our increase in underlying investments at the same time. Both of those 2 metrics are quite backward looking, so obviously they're just a snapshot in time. What we really want to see is going forward how far the fund is aligning to net zero to hit that 2050 target. So when we look at a kind of a Paris alignment metric, we can see 75.7% of our finance emissions are either aligned or aligning to net zero, or subject to an engagement program. So hopefully that shows we should be able to see that target and that metric increase over time to kind of have that increased alignment. And this is all against the kind of backdrop of increasing assets under management and funds that are continuing to outperform the market benchmark. So it's positive to see that we're achieving all of this progress in our climate metrics, but also the funds financially performing. And obviously that's important for the fund's fiduciary duty. Despite, I guess, the progress we've made so far, I think we have to be realistic. We don't believe that the performance will be linear in how we're achieving net zero. There's a lot of factors which go into why our metrics have increased or decreased. And a lot of our kind of current progress is down to asset allocation. So we've made 1.3, about 20% of the fund is now invested in climate tilted investments. This is, we've kind of done this in some of the easier kind of asset areas, but this isn't possible for all assets at this point in time. So the kind of carbon reductions will get harder and harder as kind of time goes on, as the kind of easiest, the easiest reductions have been made. And the report kind of goes into more detail on some of the other metrics. I think for now, I just want to kind of highlight about how the fund's comparing with other LGPS funds. So kind of paragraphs 31 onwards, we can see where we're able to see that comparable data, the fund performs well. And this is against a data set where there's about 87 funds, but we kind of only have comparable data for 10. So you could probably make an assumption that the funds that are reporting these metrics are kind of further along in their journey than other funds. So I think that's especially positive to see how we kind of perform there. But I'll leave it to any questions, I think, on any other areas if we go in more detail anywhere.
Right, thank you very much for that comprehensive report, Kat. Very much appreciated. Just a quick question. I think there are no other hands up, so indulge me one. If we were to go into a pooling situation as requested, so then will all this carbon agenda be still in individual sections, or will that be amalgamated with the overall pool and has to be considered as a total pool agenda? Do I make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really pertinent question. It's one I guess we're still wrestling with a bit ourselves. In the consultation, responsible investment considerations would still sit with the fund. So we don't know, I guess, what detail that would be. Obviously, there's some balance that would need to be made if the fund is making kind of specific targets which are really misaligned with the pool, then that's going to be really difficult for the pool to implement on our behalf. We're, I guess, really lucky in that with LGPS Central, we are well aligned. So they have a net zero target by 2050. So we're looking to review the net zero strategy over the next year. So we'll kind of involve Central in a lot of those discussions just to make sure we can, set realistic targets which Central can help us achieve.
Thank you. And I see no hands up. So that means agenda item 11, the net zero climate strategy process update, is duly noted. And is that agreed and noted by everybody?
Noted.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I've noticed right in the bottom of my screen, Andrew Stewart sitting there. And I hope, Andrew, you're okay. And if there are any questions, please pipe up. Don't feel left out. Yes, he is giving me the thumbs up. Thank you And you're right in the bottom corner, so it's very difficult to see you, but I know you're there. So we are now going to agenda item 12 on pages 277 to 286. And that is the pension fund training needs self-assessment. And again, it is Kat. So over to you, Kat.
Thanks. So, yeah, this is the report that the board and committee get annually. So we're just providing an update on training needs self-assessments, which I think most members have completed, and then also progress against the fund's training plan policy and last year's training plan. So I'm sure members are kind of well aware of requirements on the board, and these have kind of been set out since the board's formation, that members have personal responsibility to have an appropriate level of knowledge and understanding for the purposes of enabling yourselves to exercise your functions as members of the board. This is something the fund has kind of always, well, for a number of years, has reports training undertaken by both the committee and board members, and we report this using the fund's annual report. And we see this as part of, we always saw this as part of best practice, and it was something that had been recommended by the Scheme Advisory Board. As members, hopefully aware of the kind of general code of practice, training is also a requirement under that. So we've made sure that the fund's training policy and plan kind of just covers off any of those requirements. So to enable kind of officers to be able to give committee and board that kind of appropriate level of base knowledge and make sure kind of there's no areas of kind of knowledge missing, we've got members to complete a training needs assessment, and this is based on the kind of 8 key areas set out by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting, and that form consisted of 39 questions. I think 5 out of 6 board members have completed this, and the anonymised results are attached, but all of these responses fed into the training plan, which was as part of the business plan, which you considered earlier. So hopefully that kind of it will make sense, and we'll kind of look to put some training dates and invites out to members as soon as possible. For the 2024 training plan it was agreed that all members should complete the Hyman's Aspire training within 6 months of the policy being agreed, or I guess later point at which they're appointed. So those completions are also appended, and while recognise that there's not complete compliance, I think most members have, well, all members have completed some modules, or and of course attend meetings where there's training involved as part of that. Just asking that members that aren't compliant look to kind of complete that by the 31st of March, given we'll be taking a snapshot, and that will be included in the fund's annual report. That's all from me now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kat. And that's no comments again or anything on that. So are we happy to agree the recommendation as set out on page 279 of the agenda?
Agreed, yes.
Everybody agreed. There are no questions.
Yes, agreed.
Comment. Thank you very much. I could have a big moan, but I'm not going to. So thank you, Kat. And we move now to item 13 on the agenda, and that is on page 287 to 296. And it's a final substantious report on this agenda. That's risk management and internal controls. And I believe, yes, that is Ian. Hello, Ian, again, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. So this is the standard report that goes to each board and committee meeting. It provides the latest risk register that the fund holds, and that covers both the admin and investments. It's something the board will have seen many times, so I won't dwell other than to say the changes to this one that you wouldn't have seen from the previous. And they're detailed on point 12 onwards within the report on page 288. So the first one is we've decided to remove one of the risks, what was previously risk 12, which was where the pension fund failed to hold something called the members' GMP, guaranteed minimum pension. That exercise has pretty much been complete, and if we do need a GMP, there is a process we can log on to the HMRC website and get that information. So that's the process we do. That's business as usual, and the risk was previously really low at 2 anyway, because we'd done the bulk exercise on this a couple of years ago. So this almost felt like it was a historic risk, so we've now removed that one. In terms of changes to other previous risks, risk 19, that's the risk regarding the LGPS regulations and guidance requires changes to the fund's investments, pooling and governance processes. So what we've done is we've incorporated the recent Fit for the Future consultation and our response, which we've discussed in an earlier report today. So that just highlights within the risk that we've now considered Fit for the Future within that risk. And then we've added a new risk, which is on page 289.14 and 15. And this is really around succession planning within pensions, within the pensions administration area. We've done some work to review the ages of all the staff in the pension section, and a considerable percentage, over half of the percentage of the pension section colleagues could decide to retire in the coming few years. They're age 55 or over. Not all are senior, but quite a few are more senior than other areas, and that presumably is because people come to pensions, they tend to stay for quite a long time, and they stay for a while. Therefore, as the knowledge increases, they're obviously getting older. So we're just doing some work around that in terms of how we can sort of mitigate some of the risk there. We're looking at training, extensive training, which in fact I talked about earlier on, the point that Ruth quite rightly raised about how we're kind of managing the ongoing business as usual, really. So there's extensive training taking place internally and externally for the younger and newer members of the section. We're using an apprentice scheme, and we're continuing to monitor that. I'm not suggesting that everybody is going to retire in the next couple of years, but it's a risk that we just have got to be aware of and mitigate that and work through to ensure that all that training knowledge is passed down to the younger members of the section. I wasn't proposing to say anything else. The risk register is an attachment as always, but that was really just highlighting the key changes. But happy to take any questions.
Right, and again, Ian, I think we are racing through this agenda very quickly. There are no hands up, no comments, no questions. So we are noting the risk management and internal control reports. Can I? Yes, Manjit, everybody's hands
Yes.
up. That's unanimously noted.
Agreed.
And thank you. With that, I thank all of the officers, really fabulous, and thank you, teams. I thank all of the members who are on this call, and please do not sign off when I close this particular meeting, because Stuart is going to give us a training session straight after. So I'll get on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 14, date of the next meeting. And that meeting is scheduled for the 25th of June at 10 a.m. And if there is an election, and I've just been informed, the statement whether we are included or not will be today. Later on, it's on the Houses of Commons agenda. So anyway, whether if there's an election, you never know. You see, some of us might not be around. So anyway, 25th of June for the diaries. Previously stated, I have no other items of urgent business. And again, I would like to remind members that following this meeting, there will be a training session. And I declare this item closed at 11:44 with my grateful thanks to everybody on this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Now.